Hi guys, welcome to my jungle. Today I'm going to talk about something that I've been doing a lot of with my plants lately actually, and I've been having a lot of fun doing it. Now I know when I watch videos from the US, even when plants are being bought at big box stores, the plants always look so full and they're completely overflowing and trailing down past the pot, and there's heaps of growth points within the pot, and for some reason that just isn't the same here in Australia. I'm not saying that it's impossible. I have seen it in smaller sort of family run nurseries, but generally anytime I buy a plant, it's one vine, one plant inside the pot, one little growth point, and it might be like 3 or 4 nodes long. I'm not sure why we're getting gypped here, but I don't know, it really bugs me. I love the big overflowing full pots of plants, but it just means that I get to do that myself, which I think in the beginning I didn't have a lot of time for, and I just wanted my plant to look perfect straight away as soon as I bought it. I've really grown to love the process of buying a smaller, younger plant. Muppet, could you, leave it alone. Stop. Muppet. Muppet! Oh yes. So now I have this whole process down pat, where I bring the plant home and I chop it up and I propagate all the pieces, and then I pot all the rooted pieces up together in one pot and let it become a big overflowing plant. It sounds corny, but it really is so much more satisfying that the plant looks so lush and beautiful because of the work that I've put in rather than the money that I've spent on it. It really just makes my day to see a really beautiful plant that I purchased really cheap because I bought it small and I put my love and effort and work into, and now it's beautiful and I get to be proud, and I love that. I love that. I think what I'm going to do is show you a bunch of plants, I guess, that are work in progress plants right now. They're all, yeah, none of them are at the end goal of what I'm looking for, but they're all in different stages of this process, and I want to show what the plants are going to look like during this process because they're not going to look beautiful and perfect. And then at the end I have a philodendron Brazil that I think I'm going to chop up and show you how I start this process from the beginning. So where do I want to start? So I have a giant heartleaf philodendron, just the plain old green one, in my dining room that's growing up a totem pole. And it has, I don't even know how many growth points in there. There are so many vines in that plant. So I kind of always have cuttings on the go from that plant. And these are 2 that have been potted up. I think this was the first one that I did. So I chopped a vine off the big large mother plant, and then I chopped that vine into 1 leaf cuttings, rooted them in water I think, and they've been potted up in this pot for a little while now, and we have new growth from all those growth points. So I hope you can see that that's a reasonably bushy plant compared to sort of just 1 vine. And then this one here came a little while after. I love that giant leaf on this one. So this has 4 cuttings potted up together. The process is on its way. What else we got? Here in this pot I have my philodendron micans. This longer vine coming out of it is the one vine that was sticking out of the pot when I bought it. I've chopped this vine so many times and it just is always the same length because micans grow so fast. It's amazing. How many cuttings do I have in here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when I originally chopped this vine up, I got 5 1-leaf cuttings from it. I then propagated all the 1-leaf cuttings in a jar of water. Actually, these ones might have been in sphagnum moss, that's a lie. And once they all had sufficient roots, I potted everything up in the same pot together. So now I have all these growth points and it's already starting to give off quite a bit of new growth over here. There's all these little shoots in the pot. So eventually this will be quite a big bushy plant. This one here is a pot that lives, oh no, it doesn't actually, this isn't my golden pothos from outside, that's a lie. This was the golden pothos that I had sitting on top of my cabinets in my kitchen, but it's directly under the sort of airflow of my air fryer. And the part of the vine that hits was not loving life at all. So it was starting to lose its leaves closer to the base because that's where this sort of chute of air fryer hot air was going, and I wasn't loving that it was just one single vine in a pot anyway, so it was a good excuse to pull it down and chop it up, to be honest. So this I only did last night, and this is I think the first time that I'm trying to propagate the one leaf cuttings in soil just straight back into the pot of the mother plant. This leaf here is my mother plant. I cut it down until there's just one leaf left, and all these other leaves are one leaf cuttings that I've popped back into the pot. It's a golden pothos. It should do fine. They're pretty indestructible apart from air fryers.
I love you, sugar.
Oof. Oh, I forgot this one here. This is a true work in progress plant. It lives in a hanging pot and it's never been hung in its life because it's still establishing. This is a Hoya Matilde. This little bit here is the mother plant. Everything else in there is a 2-leaf cutting because that's just the way that Hoyas grow. And I rooted all the cuttings up in sphagnum moss in a closed glass jar, and they rooted really fast. I've now potted them all back into this pot with the mother plant, and yeah, just waiting for the roots to establish into this little pot now and for it to start giving some growth, and I'll hang it in the place where I've been waiting to hang it. Do you mind, Muppet? But right now it lives under a grow light, the one that's underneath my telly. So I just have a layer of sphagnum moss here again to keep the cuttings a little bit moist while they're rooting up. I may take it out and change it to normal soil once I feel pretty happy, but I doubt it. It just means that I have to water the pot a little bit less. And considering this is such a small pot, totally fine with that. Wow, this is a really pink propagation moment. It's kind of fun. So this is a true work in progress. I have 4 different situations that are hopefully one day all going to be one plant. So the plant here in question is this Maranta. It's just the plain green variety of the Maranta that I think is the most common, maybe. I never used to like the look of this plant, but sorry, I'm just doing some inspecting while we're at it. Yeah, I never used to like the look of this plant. I used to actually kind of hate this plant. And then when my love grew for my red vein Maranta, suddenly my interest was a little bit more piqued into finding more Maranta, and what I would do for a lemon lime Maranta. I would love the lemon lime Maranta. Is very high on my wish list. Very high on my wish list. But I don't think I've ever seen it in Australia, so that's annoying. Anyway, I actually heard someone refer to this patterning on the leaves as a little bit of a leopard print moment, and especially in the new leaves where the pattern is darker. I totally see that. And it changed the whole way that I viewed this plant, and now I have this. So the first one that I bought 2 of these plants, both from the same local nursery to me, which I have to admit is a little bit pricey on some things. Things like the Hoyas I find are priced super reasonably, but they're really common plants for some reason. They're just a little expensive, but that's fine. They generally have a little bit more variety than Bunnings. So the first one that I bought was this one here, and it had 1 more leaf on it when I bought it, which is this here. So this was the only cuttings I could take from the plant when I got home. So originally I was planning for this to be a much longer process than what I luckily have now. And then in here, the reason why I did purchase this one full price was that it had an enormous vine coming off it with these huge leaves and a lot of leaves, and I don't think I've ever seen a Maranta for sale quite that large in this size pot. So yeah, I was quite happy to be in on that one. So I managed to take 8 huge leaved cuttings off this smaller pot here, and I just have them rooting up in this big jar of water. Wow. I have this big old jar here that's nice and foggy in there at the moment, so it's a little hard to see, but I have a little layer of spag on the bottom and an entire huge Hoya canosa vine that I had living outside that just kind of wasn't loving life. I didn't like the look of it, so of course I chopped it up. I love to chop my plants. I think there's like 10 cuttings in here, 2 leaf cuttings because again, that's just Hawaii's growth pattern. They might not all make it because I'm not super diligent with this jar. I just let it do its thing, but we'll see how it goes. Alright, let's chop up a plant. First thing I have is my pot of Philodendron Brazil. Just hangs in my windowsill. Not my windowsill, it hangs on my like curtain rod rail thing in the window. And don't chop the dinosaur, Daddy! I don't do an American accent on an Australian TV ad.
Chop it!
Okay, so I just have my little scissors that I use for propagating my plants, chopping up my plants. I just got them from Bunnings. I really like that they're super narrow because it makes it a lot easier to get in between really small internodes. And I have this jar of metho here, methylated spirits, to sort of disinfect my scissors between chopping plants. You can use like rubbing alcohol and things like that. I just have metho. I just keep a jar in my plant tools cupboard, I guess. The other thing that I got out of my plant tools cupboard is this small, just plastic cup. I think I want to propagate these cuttings in sphagnum moss. So I'm just going to pop a little bit, wow, this is not good quality sphagnum moss at all. I'm just going to pop a little bit of sphagnum moss in the bottom of my cup. Okay, let's cut the plant. So, wow, isn't that such a pretty plant? This is another really underrated plant in my opinion. All the leaves come out so different from one another. And I love seeing, you know, the 4 different layers of variegation in the leaf. Oh, look at that one. Let's chop it. We have a look at this vine. Philodendron have these sheaths when the leaf first comes out and then they just dry off and kind of look ugly, to be honest. But they're also helping to let us know where the nodes are, what we're looking for. So I find that philodendrons, especially the heteroecium, that's so robust, is a fantastic plant to start propagating on and practice propagating on. Now the first node that I have here is this sheath here, brand new leaf here, and this other brand new leaf that hasn't even unfurled or hardened off or anything yet. Typically I would do a snip here and have a 1 leaf cutting with this node here, but I don't think that these leaves are sort of mature enough to be able to withhold, to be able to help this node photosynthesize. So I want to add another leaf with this first one. I'll move down to the second node here. So a node is a sort of, it's kind of like this knuckle bit on a vine, and it generally has, depending on the genus of plant, generally it has some aerial roots poking out and a leaf. This leaf here, very cute, belongs to the second node here. So I think I'll make my first cut here so that I have at least 1 mature leaf to photosynthesize and help these nodes grow some real roots. Yes. So this here is my first cutting. I will place it this way up. I'll place it this way up in the sphagnum moss so that the roots can grow down and the leaves can sit up. I'm just going to pop that there next to the cup until I've made all of my cuttings and I can pop them all in there together. Some people will leave their cutting for an hour or 2 to let the sort of wounds callus over to help minimize the chance of root rot. Seeing as you're almost always putting cuttings into a really wet medium. I have to admit, I don't tend to do this. Not that patient, just straight up, not that patient. Not going to add an extra hour or 2 onto my little spurt of plant motivation. I did let some Ripsalis cuttings callus over once, but I forgot about them and left them overnight, and they didn't end up growing roots at all. They just sort of turned into mush in the water. So if you're a better adult than I am, go for it. Let the cutting callus. All right, what have we got? The next spot on our vine. So this is where we've made our cut. And this here is the next node. I'm gonna take that sheath off because get out of here. So this leaf here belongs to that to that node, and I'm gonna snip it off. So I have a 1 leaf cutting. I have about 1 centimeter or 2 of vine on either side of the node. I think just because if you're cutting too close to the node, you might be running into some trouble. So that's what I do there. This is the next node that I have. You can see the little sheath sitting there, little area of root poking out, and this big beautiful leaf here coming off it. I'm going to snip right here, and I'm just going to keep going. Sometimes leaves can be lost or sort of knocked off at some point in their life, and you'll just have a node with no leaf. If that happens, there's a couple of things you can do. You can either sort of chop it off and throw it away. You can skip to the next node and include the next node that does have a leaf, and then you might have root growth out of both nodes on the one cutting, which is great. Nice strong plant there. Or you can chop where you normally would and just have a node cutting with no leaf. That is called a wet stick, and you can propagate from wet sticks. You have to take into account things like spent nodes, which is a whole other thing. But generally you can propagate from wet sticks. The chance of success is a little bit lower than if it has a leaf, but I've had pretty good success from just chucking my wet sticks in my prop box and forgetting about them. So while I'm finishing chopping up the last of this Brazil, I just wanted to have a little quick chat about where I want to head with this channel. I don't want it to be 100% houseplants. I kind of have a few years of like info dumping that I need to get off my chest about houseplants, and houseplants are always going to be a focus because it's one of my focuses in life. So it's definitely still going to be houseplants, but I would really like to expand the channel to chat about mental health essentially as well. That's why I have heads and houseplants in my channel name now, as well as hopefully it's a little bit easier to search and find me, as I don't have a super original channel name. But in full transparency, I've recently had a bit of a sort of mental breakdown that's greatly affected my entire life, and it's not the first that I've had, but I'm hoping that it'll be the last. Obviously mental health is something that I've struggled with a lot for as long as I can remember. I now finally have a diagnosis, which is exciting and confusing and a lot. You want to hear my fun party bag of diagnoses? ASD with level 2 support needs, inattentive ADHD, sensory processing disorder, dyscalculia, complex PTSD, anxiety, depression. Yeah, I'm a real fun person at parties, what can I say? Anyway, it has been extremely eye-opening and a little bit life-changing to now have this diagnosis, and all these things are something that affect and have always affected every element, every unit, every part of my life. Like there's nothing that those things don't affect. And I find that they, you know, have their own sort of special effect when it's something that has been diagnosed later in life, and you have this little life of not knowing first, and, you know, trying to keep up with your peers and just be a human while not knowing that you have a mental disability. So that's a lot of fun. I've had to quit my job and my apprenticeship because it's something that I just am not handling right now. I'm not sure that I'm ever sort of wired to handle that setting, but maybe with support in the future. Definitely not right now. I'm currently leaning towards learning how to be something like an ADHD coach, because that's something that I would love to have access to, but I can't seem to find any that anywhere near where I live. So, you know, maybe I can fill that void when I've sussed my own head out a little bit more. My point is that, you know, I've always wanted whatever I end up doing to be something that helps people and, you know, can kind of change people's life a little bit. And I think that sharing my own story, sharing what I learn along the way on how to manage myself and do life in a way that I can handle you know, I'd like to be that voice and that help for other people as well. So I think that's my big spiel over. Anyway, my camera battery is dying, so hopefully I get to the end of this. So I've just chopped up all of my Brazil, popped all the cuttings in this cup, and then sort of stuffed some more sphagnum moss around all the nodes at the base of the cuttings so that they stay moist and they have something to grow and adhere to. So this is what's left of the pot, just these 2 leaves here, and in this little cup here I had a lot of leaves, and these will all root up individually. I may lose 1 or 2. Propagation definitely isn't a guaranteed game. And then once these have all rooted up, we'll jump back on the camera and we'll pot it all up together and we'll see how it looks. And then once it's established and grown in a little bit and start growing over the edge of the pot, we'll jump back on camera again and see how it's going. So this is how I bush up my plants, make my plants a little bit more full, a bit more lush. I just keep this a little bit moist, so I'll pour a little bit of water from my watering can into this. You don't want it sopping wet, you don't want it sitting in a pool of water at the bottom, so let the sphagnum moss dry out a reasonable amount, especially with something like a philodendron Brazil. It can take it. Just don't let it sit there dried out for days and days on end, but you can definitely let the sphagnum moss dry out. Wet it back down again, either with a spray bottle of water, or I just pour a little bit of water in there from my watering can, and that's the care. I like to keep them in things like clear pots and clear cups and glasses and things like that, so that I can see the root action and I can see that when it's super well rooted, that's when I'll take it out and it's ready to go. But I think that's everything I have to say. So thanks for watching. I am super excited to document the progress of this philodendron Brazil. Cool. See you next time.